52 yards should be just a nice, comfortable 9-iron for him. They're going to go nuts when he hits this thing.
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Yo, welcome in, friends, to your weekly golf gambling club meeting. My name is Joe Idoni, your host at Tour Picks on Twitter. Give me a follow. This is the Preferred Lines podcast, live streaming right now on Twitter and YouTube. You can also check the audio version on iTunes and Spotify. Right after we wrap up here, we're going to talk BMW Championship. I got a special guest to help me out and figure out this brand new course that we have this week. While you're here, give it a like, subscribe. Always appreciate that kind of stuff. But here's what's on tap for happy hour tonight. Quick course preview. We're going to talk to PGA tout. Key stats to look at this week, which I really want to get his opinion on. Then we're going to go through the odds board, top favorites, mid-range, long shots. We'll talk them all. I'll give you my best bet of the week. Please, if you're here now, feel free to drop a question into the chat for either John or myself. We'll be happy to answer, and that will also enter you into a drawing for a Preferred Lines t-shirt. Looking forward to that. Final thoughts segment at the end before we wrap it up. Sponsor, Fantasy Points, in your top right, left corner, depends on how you want to orient it. Fantasy Points Media Group, proud to be a member. Then Lines 22 is the promo code that will get you 10% off a monthly sub. Huntman did his course preview. Bunch of good content creators. Dom, who was on the show a couple of weeks ago, is over there. Support them. They support me. You know the spiel. Here's what we got this week at the BMW. Brand new course, Wilmington Country Club out in Delaware. Not sure there's been many PGA Tour events there. 7,534 yard par 71. There are 3 par 5s on the course, your normal 4 par 3s, and the rest will all be par 4s. The par 5s this week ranging 582 to 649 on the card. Be interested to see kind of how those played. Robert Trent Jones golf course, original design. The greens are bent grass. I don't really want to waste any more time giving you my thoughts on the course without bringing in the expert himself. Welcome back to Preferred Lines, John Hauselbauer at PGA Tout. What's up, my man?
Joe, my friend, thank you for having me. Excited for BMW. I have some big shoes to fill because nobody can miss when they come on the show, from what I hear. And I can't seem to hit. So I feel like this is a match made in heaven. This is a long time coming. I'm feeling very due in the last sort of full field event. It's not really a full field.
It's the last event of the year.
Nobody
cares about next week. Yeah. Super Bowl week, like you mentioned, you said you are going to be there Sunday this week. What is your, we've never seen the course, Wilmington Country Club, first time they're having a PGA Tour event. Do you have an overview thought of what this place is going to reward, how it's going to play? What's your first and most important opinion on the place?
Yeah, it's a lot of inferences, I guess we would say. You can't be too confident about how it's going to play, but there's a lot of stories that you can kind of tell with the scorecard and what the stat sheets are telling you. So 7,500 plus yards, deceptive or yardage, okay, as you said. A lot of that is tied up into the par 5s. I think you look at what happens at Corrales. I think that's a good example of why total yardage doesn't really tell the whole story. You look at people who've won at Corrales, which has 2 600+ yard par 5s and some behemoth par 3s, and it's like Bryce Garnett and Graham McDowell and Joel Damon and Chad Ramey. So I'm not saying that these plotters are better off here, but when the bombers aren't reaching the par 5s and 2, there's a little bit less of a disadvantage to not having driving distance. With that said, whenever we have narrow fairways and thick rough into big greens, that tells me that guys are just gonna swing freely. If the fairways are narrow, there's not really any sense in trying to aim for the middle of them. You're probably gonna miss them anyway, so you might as well hit it as far as you can. That was the strategy at Winged Foot. Those greens were massive, and you saw it pay off for all the bombers. So I'm still leaning towards bombers. I think there's a good advantage there. Yes, there's 6 holes, 400 to 450 yards, a lot of holes under 450. So it's not going to play the full, like almost 7,600 yards, but I still want to find guys who play longer courses better.
Yeah, and one thing I noticed, John, about even the par fours, like a lot of them, the yardage is kind of eaten up by those par fives. So 6 of the holes that are par four, so 1/3 of the entire golf course, 437, 413, 391, 430, 393, and 419. These are driver, like maybe gap wedge holes for a lot of these guys. You couple in the 2 640 or so yard par fives, and you're also going to have some more shots there right around 100, 125 yards. Is that a proximity that you're kind of honing in on this week, or what range do you think the majority of shots come from? I'm sure it depends on the players, but in general.
Yeah, that's a big question mark. Usually that's something I rely on, like a data golf or Fantasy National, and just look at what the distribution was the year before. It's tough because here we don't really know if guys are going to pull driver on every hole if they want to sit back. That's kind of to each their own, I guess. So I tend to actually stay away from the proximity stats because your proximity way for Cam Young is not the same as your proximity way for Ches Reavie, and you're trying to model an entire field. So I struggle with that a little bit. That's for that reason I kind of lean towards the whole specific ranges and see over a wider sample size who plays these shorter par fours better, who plays these longer par fives better. That's just my opinion. Everybody kind of approaches it differently, but I think more than looking at it at a very micro level of hole breakdown and proximity, I'm leaning more on comp courses that I know are narrow fairways, thick rough, big greens, firm and fast bent grass. Like that's something that we see a little bit more often, and something that I feel a little more comfortable modeling off of.
Well, let me ask you about those greens. 8,100 square feet on average is massive. It's about double what we saw basically sort of the last time we were in the Northeast when we were up there in Boston for the US Open. Like, holy shit, that seems huge. Like, how do you analyze that and like figure out who's good at like 90-foot putts potentially? Like, is it more so factoring? I guess what I'm asking you, are you putting more of an emphasis on putting, or is it more so less of an emphasis on like chipping, pitching, sand saves because those greens are so easy to hit?
Yeah, the way I would treat a giant green course, I would say probably going to be a higher green in regulation. That seems to be a given, which would mean less up and downs needed, less scrambling emphasis, less short game. That's like I want to draw comp to Torrey Pines, but that's such a significant difference between here and a place like Torrey Pines, where like your ball striking is probably, you want similar ball strikers who have success at both, but short game so different because Torrey Pines has such short, small greens, and it's such an emphasis to be good around the greens. Something like that, I haven't really been thinking Victor Hovland, but you would think a course like this would play in his favor. If it's not on the green, it might even trickle into a bunker, which he seems to hole out from every bunker he finds himself into somehow. So I would play it that way. And also, like, I think it's not really a detriment to miss these fairways, because if you're hitting out of the rough into big greens, you can still hold them. So we'll see how it plays out, but that's kind of how I'm approaching it.
Yeah. What do you think of like, are they going to tear this place up? Because I'm looking at like, a lot of those short par fours, they should be able to rip through pretty easily. I'm looking at like Western Golf Association events that have been played there, is just trying to glean something. And they've been won at like -22 to -27 under par. So they're tearing it up. They are like, you imagine the PGA Tour setup is more difficult, and they've tried to really juice this thing up, but a lot of places tried. Caves Valley thought that they juiced that place up last year. Like, are we in for another 20 to 25 under par week?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think Caves Valley, unfortunately, got like record rainfall, and it was just point and shoot. Like, if you could carry the bunkers, if you could drive a ball 300-yard carry distance, you were going to tear that course apart. And we saw it with Bryson and Rory and Burns and everybody who was a long hitter is up there, and Cantlay gained like 11 strokes putting. So he was kind of there as an anomaly, but it really was advantage bombers there. I think, they probably overcompensate a little bit. They had an extremely difficult event at Olympia Fields, moving to Caves Valley, and then it becomes extremely easy. A lot of complaints from the players. I know like Shane Lowry was extremely upset about the setup there. He played so well. He shot like 18 under, and he just didn't hit enough putts. So players don't want that either. I look at this layout and you're going to have one par 5 that's like a gimme birdie opportunity. You're going to have 2 par 5s you're going to struggle on, a bunch of difficult par 3s, and some moderate par 4s. So I think without super soft conditions, I would expect the winning score to be like 16 under is probably what I'm guessing. I don't think it's a pure birdie fest. The BMW Championship does have a reputation for getting to 20 under. I think part of that is just really good fields, really good players, talented deep fields going at it on a course that's not necessarily designed to like torture you like a US Open setup would be. But yeah, I would say 16 under is my guess, and I'm picking a player pool around guys I think it can get there.
What's the defense? Is it hazard? Is it water? Is it bunkers? Is it rough? Like, where does this course fight back?
Yeah, I think the greens are going to be tricky here. They seem to be firm and fast and rolling, sloping, some elevation change. One other thing, you think about a giant green and you say you can't miss it. Like everybody's going to hit these greens, regulation, easy course. A giant green actually gives you a lot of flexibility with where you can put the pins, and you can set up some really tricky pin locations. You can tuck them. And that's actually a luxury with a giant green that you don't have with smaller greens. That's something that at Southern Hills, they actually made the greens a little bit larger so that they could be more creative with pin locations. So I would like to believe that if they see this get out of hand on day one, they get a little bit more crafty with the pin locations. But yeah, I think you're going to have to putt well here. Obviously, it's kind of a given any given week, but the rough is going to be thick. And if you can avoid 3 putts, I think you're setting yourself up pretty well.
All right, you ready to see the odds board?
Hit me.
All right, I'm pulling it up now. All right, odds board, betting the board, brought to you by Fantasy Golf Pod. Chad, Eric, Jish, all my boys over there doing their thing on either Wednesday or Thursday nights right before the tournament. Check them out. Chad does a bunch of good stuff, has ownership projections, talking like guessing the sort of pricing, which I always love to see, the narratives. Give those guys a follow over there. Without further ado, let's bring in the odds board. Your favorite this week, as it has been almost every week, is Rory McIlroy. John Rahm back in second, 14-1 over at DraftKings. Patrick Cantlay, Justin Thomas are in there in the 16 to 14-1 range. Matt Fitzpatrick is 18-1. Scotty Scheffler is 16-1. Tony Finau 16. These numbers are dropping. John, there's a ton of guys under 20-1. Do you like any of them?
At a glance, no. I think everybody was disappointed when they saw the odds this morning. Obviously, community win on Zalatoris. I was not a part of it, but I'm happy for my friends. The books took a beating, I'm sure, and you usually see that here. The other thing you have to keep in mind, this is half the size of a regulation field, so you should see half the number that you're used to seeing. I think if you double it, then that becomes sort of a fair number in a full field. And if it's more than that, then you're actually seeing some value. So that's kind of how I look at these shorter fields like we would see in like a WGC.
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to agree there. We've trimmed a lot of the fat though, so the big names are still here, which we've seen sort of winning tournaments. When I first looked at it, I thought I was going to have some interest in John Rahm. The number's too low. I was hoping for another 18 to 20. For me, I was drawn to JT. I was drawn to Patrick Cantlay. Haven't pulled the trigger on either one of them yet. I'm still kind of in between the two, but I did bet a guy that I don't normally bet, and it's kind of part of this like just not ignoring the stats, because I feel like they've really, like, if you've just been looking at who's striking it and who's playing well, it's kind of been obvious. I'm not going to go Willie Z back to back, but I am going to go 3 out of 4 for big man Tony Finau. 16-1, best bet of the week for me. First right now in strokes gained tee to green, absolutely crushing at the last 36. His approach numbers have been fantastic. Second, he's hitting his irons really as well as he maybe ever has. Scrambling, like, if we're going to talk about a place where you can potentially bomb and gouge and just hit it into the rough and try and get yourself up and down in many instances when there's not like behind a tree, is for birdie in these type of courses. Scrambling, second in the field. His putting is vastly improved, and like bent grass is really the place that you want to play Finau. That's not going to be like an abnormally, that he all of a sudden has a good week, because he normally has done that pretty well. So he's putting it well. He's hitting his irons great. He's scrambling. He's tee to green. Everything's sort of lining up. The recent form there, even a fifth last week at a course that I think didn't quite make as much sense for him as a place like this does. I'm going to go back with no course history and just kind of ride the guy who I think over the last month has played the best golf.
Yeah, that's a good bet. And where else has really oversized, firm and fast sloping greens is Augusta, where he actually tends to putt well. One of the only times of the year before he became this transcendent world beater. So I gave Tony a long look. I didn't end up getting there myself, but it's crazy what he's done to turn around his putter, especially when you had that clip of him at the Open where he had that like ridiculous apparatus on the practice green.
Oh God.
That's the last time I bet Tony. And ever since I got off the wagon, he's never looked back. So whatever that process was, it seems to be paying dividends for him.
Yeah, so Finau was second in the stat model that I ran. Rory was first still, although I'm just not feeling Rory this week. And I know the course makes a lot of sense. The number is not horrible to ask given what he was at majors, but I just feel like a little bit of steam got let out of the engine there when after the Open Championship. Next week, maybe. I don't know, but it just doesn't feel right when you give it how well Tony is playing. So Tony is second. I wish there was a way for, like, when you look at the stat models and they have the rankings like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on Fantasy National, if you could see like the gap, because I feel like the gap between Tony at 2 and JT at 3 is pretty large. Like when I'm looking across the boards of the things that I weighted, Finau's fantastic in almost all of them. And Thomas has got a bunch that are like 28th, 17th, 12th. Like he's not quite as good. I just feel like Tony has really, with the recent form, seemed to separate himself. What do you think about Willie Z? Like, such a moment for him. Proud of him. Like, he did win on a penalty stroke against Sepp Straka in a playoff. So like, but we won't remember that. We'll remember him finally breaking through. We'll remember the form and the run that he's been on for the last 2 years in big time events. Any interest going back there or no?
Will in Wilmington, I feel like that narrative kind of writes itself. Yeah, I mean, it suits him again. I think the only thing you could say against Zalatoris now is like, was that too emotional of a win? Was he chasing that for so long that is not grinding the next couple days? From what I understand with Will Zalatoris, he is an absolute grinder, and he is out there practicing every day and trying to get better every single day. Waking up like first guy on the course type of dude. So I wonder if getting that win just throws him off slightly a little bit. And, these are the sort of narratives that get me off of hitting the right player. But obviously he's playing really well. I think 16 is an extremely fair number where you can still kind of get him around. He's in this 16 range where it's like, are you going to take Zalatoris, Tony, Scheffler, Fitzpatrick, Thomas, Cantlay? Like, they're all 16-1, and it's like, how do you decide? I don't think you can go wrong with any of them, but I do think it sets up, when you're putting a betting card together, that you want to have like at least 2 of these guys at the top of the board.
You mentioned the like emotion in that victory for Zalatoris, and I love that kind of stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit about it in the final thoughts, but there was a saying, and I don't remember exactly how it goes, but it's along the lines of like, you only want what you have. In that, basically what it means is like, in order to like want that victory so much, you have to know that you have what it takes. Like, I want to win a PGA Tour event, but I could never do it. So it's not really like what I mean by that is he wanted that so bad. And he had told us in interviews after the Masters, after the US Open, after Southern Hills, like he looked them right in the eyes in the camera and said, I have what it takes to win. I know it's going to happen for me. I know that I keep putting myself in these positions. I'm going to break through. And to put that out there in such a vulnerable spot and then do it like in the FedEx Cup playoffs, I have to feel like you could really see he's sort of internalized a lot of this over the last year in how much it meant to him, and that sort of release and being able to come through. I don't necessarily know that that's going to affect anything that happens this week, but tough to bet him at half the number this week, 14-1, when you had 28 last week in a bigger field.
Yeah. Well, for some it's a dream, and for some it's an expectation, and it's all a mentality thing. And I think a lot of people knew that Zalatoris is wired differently from the get-go. That's why he has this big bandwagon behind him of guys who keep on going back to him and betting him. It did seem kind of inevitable that he was going to get across the finish line. I don't think anybody's surprised that it came in that moment, but and it was also all the old caddy's fault. So it's not even his fault.
That
he found the right guy now. So
we've seen a lot of that this year, like guys switching up caddies and like Scotty, just having success almost immediately after with just a different voice. I don't know. Did you see the video when Zalatoris went back and tried to hit the shot off the rocks and it went into the water?
Yeah,
so great. Like
he spent about
it out.
10 minutes.
I can't believe he thought about it for that long. But great, just caddy earned every dollar right there.
Absolutely.
Moving down the board, let's talk mid-range. We've seen back-to-back winners in this sort of 20 to 30 range with Zalatoris and Tom Kim. Xander's at 20-1. Morikawa off of good weeks, 22. Sammy Burns, 25. Sung Jae Im, 27. Cameron Young, 28. Victor Hovland, 28. Give me a name in here that you like.
So Xander Schofley is the guy that I have bet already. It's interesting. We've gotten an inverse reaction from the books with Xander. When Xander was not winning, he was always in the teens at an unbettable number. Now he's put 2 wins together very recently in pretty dominant fashion. And now he's the guy that drifts into the second tier in the 20s. I got him at 22-1. I feel great about it. All the stat models I was running in, he's really good on these courses where the thick rough is in play and it rewards good total driving. And if you hit it into the rough, he's got the distance to knock it out of there. Just a really good all-around game. Didn't have his best stuff last week. I don't understand why, but you look long-term, if you can dismiss one tough week, he sets up extremely well for this. He rated out like number 1 in both long par 3 scoring and long par 5 scoring. So I think that's interesting. I don't know what the sample size behind it was, but the fact that he is kind of elite in both of those categories makes me think that he sort of lines up well for this course. And he's a prolific winner now. So that stigma is gone.
A lot of them now.
I mean, it's a no-cut event. So even if the stigma was not gone, like this is his bread and butter. So I just think it's a lot of signs pointing to Xander this week.
What your stat model this week? What's your highest weighted stat that you've got in there?
So I did a cop out of strokes gained tee to green because I was just like, I don't know. I don't feel confident in any given stat. So I'm like, give me a lot of recent form. Give me a lot of comp courses within the last couple of years was high up there. I put approach high. And then I put good drives gained on conditions that have narrow fairways and thick rough, because that's sort of this combo stat where you can't really model in Fantasy National of approach from the rough. But what you can do is get essentially greens in regulation on courses where it's going to be difficult to hit the fairway. And if you don't, you're going to be out of the rough. So that was another category that Xander rated out very well in. Justin Thomas was number 1 in that model. He was up there last week. I was suckered into betting him. And of course, the putter just continues to not cooperate when we need it most. But he'll be interesting this week. But I'm rolling with Xander. I feel less squeamish than I usually do on a Xander bet.
What about your boy? I saw you put him in the article. Obviously, one of the best free course preview articles there is. If you aren't following PGA Tout, I don't know how you stumbled upon this podcast, but go check that out. Cameron Young, like you mentioned, good drives gained. Probably the pound for pound, the last 6 months, the best driver of the ball on tour. Long, straight, accurate, just an absolute weapon off the tee that he has. Wasn't great last week, but I think he obviously has the ability to bounce back here. 28-1. Is that a price we need to get used to for Cam Young?
That is starting to feel a little short. I don't know if you remember this time last year, But Bryson DeChambeau opened at 35-1 on DraftKings, and everyone with a Twitter account with golf somewhat related to the word bet it. And it went down immediately. And it seems to have become the BMW Championship that DraftKings just anoints a bomber at 35-1, completely mispriced before the week even begins. And that kicks off BMW Championship week, and everybody bets it. Everybody is on Cameron Young this week. I don't know if you got him at 35 or 30. 28's getting a little tighter, and it depends how many books you have at your disposal. Fortunately, in New Jersey, I've got everything that we're looking at here, which is fantastic. But yeah, I mean, what more does Cameron Young have to do to prove himself? He's got 7 top 3 finishes this year as a rookie. It's insane. He's done it in majors. He's done it in difficult scoring conditions. He's done it on short courses where you don't even need driver. He's done it on wide open, easy birdie fest course. So it's not even a matter of a course fit. And I like a guy who's been that versatile on a course that I don't exactly know how it's going to play out, but it doesn't really matter if he's proven, whether it's Harbor Town or Southern Hills, that he can be in the mix.
Yeah. Love the drive. Like, I just think back to like how he performed at St. Andrews. And I know it's totally different, but where everyone was sort of had this adopted this style of, I'm just going to take driver everywhere at St. Andrews, which I don't think a lot of us, we thought it might happen, but not to the degree I think that we ended up with. He did it better than anyone. Like, even going back to Sunday, Rory, Hovland, Cam Smith, like these guys are all sort of in that fescue, and it was fine. You could play from it. But then they like cut to Cam Young, and he's like 30 yards from the green in the middle of this tiny little fairway that he's able to hit. I think about the massive putting surfaces and like some of the tremendous lag putts that he hit there as well. Just really lines up. I haven't done it yet. I'm between him and Victor. The problem that I have is Cam Young is 25 and Victor's 33. I feel like it's kind of stupid to like semantics over the 5 to 8 points, but I do think Hovland played very well last week. I think the lack of around the green game being a huge factor, where he can spray it a little bit off the tee, use his irons, where the approach play was actually really good at the Open. When I looked at Rick's site, the approach play was really good last week. The approach play actually wasn't what hurt him at the Scottish either. So his irons have really sort of turned around. He was that guy I was saying like around December last year was the best driver of the ball. So I think that he can get it back. I have a lot of interest in one of those two, but I'm leaning Victor right now just because of the points.
Yeah, he also didn't have his clubs at the Scottish, so you can just throw it away.
Chalk it up. Ju Young Kim, 33-1. Joaquin Niemann, like quiet right now, 40-1. Jordan Spieth, a very quiet 40-1. Shane Lowry was okay last week. He's been playing, though. We saw him at the Wyndham. We saw him last week. Hideki, what do we do with Hideki? He's 50-1 now. That feels like a horrible misprice, but the form has just been awful. But he's the name that jumps off the page to me. Connors 55, Homa 55, Hatton 55. This is sort of the meat and potatoes, mid-range. You got anything you like, bud?
I would say Lowry is the guy I like the most in this range. I think Firestone is a very good comp to this as another Robert Trent Jones course with the thick bent grass rough. He opened at 50, and I really thought about it. I think he's 40 to 45 everywhere now. I didn't pull the trigger on him. I think I'll definitely be there on like a top 20, maybe a top 10. He's been losing with the putter like for months, and he finally put something positive together last week. So I think that's encouraging. And something about the subjective, the big guys hitting out a thick rough. Like, I want Shane Lowry hitting out of this rough. I don't want Zalatoris hitting out of this rough. I want big Shane Lowry hacking away.
Do you think that Kentucky Blue or whatever they're using is going to be grown up, going to be thick this week?
I think they're going to try to make it thick. I think especially after with Caves Valley, they're going to want to make this as difficult as they can. And from what I'm hearing, it's going to be a factor. I think similar murmurs from what we were hearing about St. George's and at the RBC Canadian, where they really just tried to make that as lush as possible. I think that's going to be what we're dealing with this week.
Question I want to get to from the chat here, and you're probably, I don't know this for sure, but I'm not like huge into playing a bunch of lineups in DraftKings. Any difference for you in like max exposure for one guy in terms of like what percentage of one player with the smaller field, only top 70 guys in the field this week, about half the normal size field. Does that change how you do your ownership when you build lineups?
Yeah, I'm not a huge like mass entry guy either. I do dabble with like the 20 max, but that's probably about as far as I go from a DFS perspective. I like the single entries, which is a lot less leverage based. But I would say the risk of striking out on a player is much less when you have a no cut event. So if you're the worst player in the field, you're not making that many less points than the 30th best player in the field because you're still getting 4 rounds. So I think it's still a good idea to do stars and scrubs. I think you still want to go heavy on your guys and not like spread across a very like wide player pool. So I think you want to pick up a tight player pool. There's guys at a flat 6K that I think are very viable this week. So I see myself going like very extreme stars and scrubs with my lineups.
Love that. Hatton at 55, getting back to the odds board. Haven't bet anyone in this range. I've got someone a little bit further down. But that would be the most interesting one just because I felt really strongly about him last week. He was a typical Hatton nightmare roller coaster last week where he was like 4 under through his first 4 holes, gave it back. He was making runs, and then he was like finishing 18 with a double bogey almost every day. I just, when I go to someone like that at like 55, 60 to 1, I understand the volatility. And I almost feel like I've got to stick with it for a couple of weeks to just kind of ride it out and hope that you get that upside. Though I don't feel like it's a great course fit for him. Kind of moving down the odds board a little bit, John. Adam Scott played pretty well last week, 60 to 1. Billy Ho, 66. Russell Henley, 70 to 1. Brian Harman played pretty well, 75 to 1. Cam Davis, 75. Davis Riley, 80. Keith Mitchell, 80 to 1. Is there any viability in terms of betting this event this far down the odds board, do you feel like?
For me personally, I'm picking like 3 guys under 35 to 1 and calling it a day. Definitely gonna be a tight card for me. You look at the winners of the BMW Championship, and I think besides Keegan Bradley, it's been all like 30 to 1 or less guys. Very few surprises. It's the playoffs with all the best players left here. So I look at this range and nothing really grabs my eye, but I am still looking at this range from like a DFS perspective. I think Adam Scott makes a lot of sense here. He plays very well in some of those longer, heavy, rough, like premium on total driving types of courses. So wouldn't surprise me to see him in the mix this week. I'm curious to see what his ownership becomes.
Yeah, so you know me. I always throw a couple of flyers in down here. I don't have each way, so I'm just betting them to win. But I took Cameron Davis, 75 to 1. This top 7 in the field in terms of driving distance, really underrated, like short wedge player as well. When I looked at like 100 to 125, he's top 10 in there. Really good in opportunities. The only surface in which he tends to gain strokes throughout his career putting is bent grass. If we're going to play bomb and gouge, I just feel like there's a scenario in which he gets it right. We're looking at him at like 20, 25 to 1 in a couple of events through the Midwest there where he got really popular. Also Midwest courses that I think may share some similarities. Is he going to slay a field like this? Probably not. But like, look, like if Sepp Straka hits a 175-yard shot onto the green last week, he wins that tournament. And like that would have been a wow moment of a guy coming in with no form. So it's doable. It's not that far out of the stretch. And I think that his style of play could be rewarded here if things go right.
Yeah, I'm Cam Davis fan for life. You and me both after Rocket Mortgage last year. So I'm always rooting for him. He is a monster on bent grass putting. He always pops whenever you're running that. I don't know why that is. I don't know what his ties are to bent. But whenever you put him on here, he seems to explode. And like you said, long course that does play right into his strengths.
Okay, my final bomb of the week, my first tweet of the day, the absolute first click. We're going to do triple digits on Sahith. It looks like he's just a little bit lower there now, but at 100 to 1, I'm riding it till the wheels fall off. I freaking love this kid. He's like got all the emotion and energy and passion that you saw out of Zalatoris. Like Sahith has that, where I talked earlier about like you only want what you can have. Like, he wants it extremely bad. He's good enough to do it. He's aggressive enough to not back down in contention and like go for it. Like what he did at the Travelers, it was such a stupid move, but in a weird way, I have so much like respect for just going for that. And I really do feel like that's going to like his style of play, even going back to Phoenix, where he was extremely risky, taking driver on 17, like that's going to be payoff at some point. And when it goes right, he's going to win 1 or 2 events in a year. I'm going to take the 100-1 and just keep riding it. He's always has like this really low day where he'll fire a 63 and then 3 like level par days. If he can put like 2 really good days together, he's in contention all of a sudden on Sunday. If it turns into a birdie fest, I like him even more. That's my case for like a Sahith 100-1 ticket. And it's always going to be my case as long as he's that number.
See, it's the man. I love this guy. Like, you got to root for it. Like, even if I don't have money and he's like in the mix, like he was at the Travelers, I'm like, I want him to pull this out. Just so much fun to watch as a fellow club thrower and the club dropper on the course. Like, I love to see myself out there on the course. So in a lot of ways, Sahith and I are basically the same golfer. So I'm rooting for him. We'll see. You know, I have concerns about the longevity of my man Mito next year on the PGA Tour. So if I become a free agent, I need to hitch myself to a new bandwagon. I think it's got to be Sahith.
I just gotta like these guys who like play golf so passionately. Like that's why I like first got really into Brooks, and not like you could outwardly see it, but like the competitive like alpha, like this means so much to me. And like it just brings me back to other sports like football, like stuff where you see it so outwardly. Love it out of Sahith. Chris has got a question here before we get out of this range. Don't you dare besmirch Keegan. I'm not going to, but I'm not going to bet him. What about you?
One of the things I was looking at was weighted putting on just recent last 36 rounds, bent grass, firm and fast greens, and 3-putt avoidance altogether. And Keegan was like top 3. And I had to like rerun it and then like check a different sample and then look back manually and see like, what am I doing here? He's like become a good putter. Like, it's crazy to say. It seems insane. You saw what he did at the Wells Fargo, where he was actually in it because of the putter. And it's clear that he's been working on it with the aim point, something. It's not a liability anymore. And it just so happens that once he got the putter to click, some of the ball striking numbers start to go away. So you hope that he can marry it together. I'm really looking at him this week, definitely in DraftKings, and maybe even a placement bet.
It's Capper. Like, how did I not know it? Of course it's Capper. Christopher really threw me off there, Chris C. Cool, dude. Well, where else? Like, you doing anything else this week? Obviously, the article is published now. Are you on any other podcasts this week? You doing any other content that people can check yourself out on?
I'll be doing a quick little preview video. I'm starting to do that a little bit more often for the bigger events. So I'll probably put something up on YouTube tomorrow or tweet it out. Value article tomorrow, and then final bets out on Wednesday. And then look out for me if you're at the BMW Championship on Sunday. I'll be there. I'll probably wear this hat. Catch me repping Flex Seal. I won't be following Munoz on a Thursday, but I think he's in the field, so I'll probably watch a couple
first round
strokes
leader
in.
bet. Yeah. You have to.
That's it for me.
Thanks, dude. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on as always. Like, having you on in a week where nobody's knows shit about the golf course was ideal. So thank you for agreeing to it. Always a pleasure. Appreciate you, my man.
Absolutely. Good luck this week, my friend.
All right. See you later. PGA tout, the absolute man. Appreciate him coming on. Let's talk prize picks. PL100. That's the promo code. $100 deposit match. It's fun to do like these cross sport ones, the strokes ones. Like, you can bet the birdie or better matchups, how many strokes over under for a particular player. It's fun. Really clean, easy to use app. PL100 will get you $100 off that first deposit. Use that code. That helps me out. Appreciate prize picks. Let me bring them up here. Just put them in the top corner so they give my boys a little love here on the there we go, on the graphic side of things. Okay, let's talk final thoughts. What are they going to say now? That was so awesome. I'm so glad that he did that. That I was excited by that. I wasn't a part of the community who bet him 28-1 like an idiot. I did jump in on Sunday, but I was like that guy that shows up to the party like late and he's just on it. He's on a different vibe. He's on a different wavelength than the rest of people, like either too drunk or not drunk enough, but just didn't quite fit in. Still, what a moment. Absolutely loved it. This magical blend of competition, history, meaning of that, like what we saw is something that you can't put a price on and can't be bought. Jeff Feinberg, my buddy, summed it up, I thought, perfectly on the Pat Mayo show. Congrats to Pat, by the way, for winning his own Listeners League. What an epic moment for him. They both had the winner. It was a moment that we saw something that we rarely see out of golfers, in that chip on your shoulder aggressiveness, that concoction of testosterone and emotion. Like Liv can't get that kind of tea. Their low T tour, like that was the incredible moment where it just all you could see it come off of his shoulder, and it's what makes the PGA Tour special. It's a story about struggle. It's about overcoming obstacles and hurdles in life that ultimately make the perseverance so much more rewarding. What are they going to say now? Like, I'm still in shock and awe. Like, it was much more than beating Sepp Straka. It was a personal battle within. Like, if you notice, when it occurred, if you think back to it, wasn't like it was a putt for him to basically get into a playoff. It wasn't a winning putt. Yeah, Sepp Straka was likely going to make par. He was going to end up in a playoff anyways. It showcased how internal that was for him, where it wasn't about beating Straka. It wasn't necessarily even in a weird way like about finally winning. It was just about proving it to himself. So many opportunities from the U.S. Open, from Torrey Pines, had slid by on the edge, and this one went in, and that's why we saw the moment for Willie Z. I became like an even bigger fan when I saw that. He, without a doubt, heard rumblings. Best player never to win. Can he ever get over the hump? Can he putt? It's something that I think I mentioned earlier. He's internalized for so long and not really probably not spoken about it. I know he hasn't really spoken about it outwardly to reporters, the pressure. He probably hasn't spoken about it to his close friends and family and fiance, but silently it always sat there. Someone can have 100 positive things to say about you, and you will grasp at that one negative thing. That's the way we're wired. It's an important lesson to not let the negativity around you bring you down, diminish your accomplishments, perpetuate failure and discontent. Like, keep going. Use it as fuel. Use it as motivation. Use whatever you have going on in your life right now that isn't ideal as motivation to get to the next step. I think that's what he did. Anytime we can get that sort of injection directly of competitiveness, of fire, of emotion, in professional golf, like we saw yesterday, it brings me closer to the game and it forms a connection with the audience, which I think he did. It shows like a vulnerability, which I hope is partly like me doing these off-topic final thoughts segments. Oftentimes, like, I'm very insecure about it. I feel it like puts me in a weird spot of vulnerability to talk about this stuff to you guys, to who's ever listening. But I think for the people that stick around, it strengthens my connection with you, with the audience, to know me, the good, the bad, what I struggle with, how much it means to me. And it makes this potentially more than just another talking head talking about golf, but it motivates me to get better. I'm happy that he broke through. Seeing how much it meant to him, I felt good for him. He used that negativity as fuel to do something better. You could see it on his face. You could see it in that hug. What are they going to say now? Let's fucking go. Love y'all. Peace. Have a great day. I'm going to pick a winner for the PLT out of the comments in the chat. I will reach out via DM. Appreciate the hell out of all of you guys for checking out the show this week. Tour Championship. I'll have thoughts on it next week. They may not be positive thoughts, but I will try. Talk to you later. Peace.